Welcome to the Deeks.ai podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. I'm Michael Ferrari.
I'm Ryan Scholl.
Please join us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time. Wake Forest alum Dr. Ryan Melvin is here to teach us about the hidden dangers of toxic tech productivity. Now at UAB leading emerging technology efforts, he tells us how he runs his modern AI classroom, defines the radical shift in the medical field because of powerful specialized artificial intelligence models, and shares the magic he produces by talking to the machines. But he also warns us that the addictive dopamine hits from current AI coding techniques can present perils to our precious human time. Hey everybody, Future Michael popping in with a little message that I wanted to add to the beginning of this episode. In this episode, we briefly touch upon a very serious subject matter, and that's in regards to AI-encouraged self-harm. I just wanted to make it really clear that we are talking about national news stories in regards to AI-encouraged self-harm. We're not discussing something that, we witnessed or that impacted us personally or happened around us. And I can include a couple of links in the description of this podcast to those stories that we're talking about. But yeah, with it being such a serious subject matter, we kind of just thought it made sense to make it clear that we weren't speaking from a place of personal experience and that we were just discussing, some national news that made the rounds. With that, let's get into this episode.
Here we are again at Deeks.ai, still the #1 higher education artificial intelligence podcast at Wake Forest University. Today we are all virtual, we are all remote because we have a very special guest. We have an alum with us. So this is part of our alumni series, and he was at Wake a while ago. He's very accomplished now, so we love to see our grads go out in the real world and do something. We have Ryan Melvin with us, and he's currently at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And I was looking through his titles, and there's just way too many titles to list. I don't know how you keep track of them, Ryan. So
it's like a Lord of the Ring character or something.
Honestly, I mean, is this just like a Rolodex? Like you just pick these, but I'm going to let you try to describe what all these mean. Recommended by a special friend of the pod, Freddie Salisbury. Now, when you're here, you apparently 1 degree is too easy for you, so you decided to get both a master's and a PhD, mathematics and statistics, then physics. A little bit crazy to me. I don't know why you do that to yourself, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you did at Wake, and then how you got to Birmingham?
Sure. I'm Dr. Ryan Melvin. I'm an associate professor of anesthesiology at the University of Alabama at Birmingham for anesthesia and perioperative medicine. I'm also the vice chair for emerging technologies in the same department, king of the Andals and the first man, breaker of chains.
Wow. I really hope we have some Game of Thrones fans here.
I was at Wake 2013 to 2018. And I got a PhD in physics with Freddie Salisbury as my advisor, specifically computational biophysics. And while working on the stuff for the PhD, I saw this rising tide of data science. And so I stuck around maybe a year longer than I really needed to and took some math classes, did a thesis to get a master's in statistics so that I could jump into the data science wave. And with that, I was recruited by Wells Fargo and spent a couple of years with them as what's called a quant. If you've seen The Big Short, when one character yells, "This is my quantitative," that's me. So I predicted the financial future with math for a little while, and I guess I was okay at it. Wells Fargo is still around.
When did you say you were here from?
2013 to 2018.
Oh, I thought you said 2018 to 2019. I was like 1 year. I was like, I don't think I'm legally allowed to talk.
As you can tell, Michael doesn't really listen to our guests, so.
No, I was like, whoa.
This is going well so far.
That's funny. An AI, he's responding to the questions in his head. The real one.
So, explain this to me. I don't really get this. So, you've done statistics and then physics. and then you've done quantitative analysis at Wells Fargo. Now you're in the medical field, and you went to emerging tech. What the heck, dude? How does this all fit together?
I think the common thread that runs all the way through is something called time series analysis. This is when you have data that has a time element. So you could think of closing prices of a stock at the end of each day. So the day and the stock price. You have the stock price as the data and the day as the time element. When I was at Wake Forest, I was working with high resolution simulations of macromolecules. These are like RNA, DNA, proteins. And so those simulations were essentially a movie. And so every frame in the movie has a timestamp. At Wells Fargo, financial data I just described has a timestamp associated with it. And when I was recruited to work at UAB, it was originally for high resolution physiologic data. So this would be things like blood pressure sampled 250 times a second, ECGs sampled up to 500 times a second. And so there's that time bound element that sort of runs all the way through those jobs that I've had.
Okay, that clears it up very well. So now you're down in Birmingham. Explain to us a little bit about your role there.
Sure.
Or
Like
I guess you've had a couple different roles. So maybe how you
accurate.
started and then how where you are now.
Just so we're clear, everything I say is speaking for myself as an individual. None of this represents the thoughts or opinions of my employers or anyone else besides me. I was first recruited to work on the high resolution physiologic data, sometimes called waveform data, that the Department of Anesthesiology and Perioperative Medicine started collecting. In 2020-ish is when they started collecting that data. And then after a couple of years of doing that and publishing what, as far as we can tell, is still the largest ever human outcome study using high resolution data to predict optimal blood pressures, we also started working on predictive analytics. So this is things like, if a patient is discharged, are they going to unexpectedly, end up coming back? Are they going to unexpectedly end up with an emergency team call when they move to a different unit? So we're doing that sort of predictive analytics using traditional machine learning. And then at the end of 2022, start of 2023, when generative AI started taking over the world, we chased that dragon as well and sort of started working on, okay, what can we do that won't alarm information security and violate HIPAA and privacy laws? And we started building sort of these tools that help with administrative tasks using generative AI. And so my job really has shifted from high resolution data analysis to predictive analytics to generative AI. And that was why we decided to become the division of emerging technologies, because we realized we're essentially just always chasing what's next, and we'd like to keep doing that.
In your role, now whatever role you want to speak of, but in the emerging technologies, can you tell us a little bit about some of these Gen AI use cases?
Sure. We've published most of them, and we're trying to publish the ones that we haven't, so they're all public knowledge at this point.
You can tell us about the public ones.
Our biggest and most famous one is a tool that helps prepare human subject research protocols. So if someone has a research idea, they need to describe that accurately to ethics committees, institutional review boards, and our tool will ask them a series of questions and then help them write sort of the narrative description of the study that they're doing. Another tool that has become quite popular is one that helps with literature search. You can tell it an idea you have or your aims from a grant if you want, from your own grant, I should specify, not someone else's. And it will help you find literature related to the topic. And unlike maybe some other tools folks might have used, our tool, we are 100% certain that the citations that come out of it are real. And that's because we don't let the AI do the citation writing part. We watch what articles it finds and reads from PubMed, which is the favorite repository of most clinicians. We watch what it reads, and then we cite those articles programmatically using the PubMed API. So the AI is not writing the citation, which is how we know for sure they are real. And then we've moved into other tools, some that can help with research, such as few-shot learning. So this is where you don't have 1,000 examples that you might need to train a traditional machine learning model. Instead, we can use a foundation model like the thing behind ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, to do the labeling of the data rather than training a task-specific model. And so we have a tool that can help researchers who maybe don't have enough data to train a traditional model. And we even have tools that help people prepare for grant submissions. We do not have tools that help write grant applications. Funding agencies have said that's a no-no. Instead,
wow.
we have tools that will watch for maybe language that we know a funding agency is flagging for one reason or another, and help the author of the application figure out a different way to say what they were saying. Or we have one that spots patterns that make humans think a text was AI written. The Wikipedia Foundation put together a big list for their own editors of things to look for in articles that suggest it was AI written. And so you have a tool that actually looks for those same patterns and then suggests ways to avoid them. It doesn't matter if you're...
Is this the same tool that students use to try to fool their teachers that they haven't put their paper into ChatGPT?
It is, in fact, a humanizer. Yeah, those are called humanizers. And it is a humanizer because we're not really concerned with whether your application was written by an AI. It shouldn't be for most funding agencies. We're concerned with whether you get accused of your application being written by an AI. I should take a moment here. I don't think I've said anything super opinionated, but I'm speaking as myself, by the way. I'm not speaking for UAB in any of this. This is just Ryan Melvin's opinion. And I imagine as part of
That's a good disclaimer.
Yep. And the other one I have to say is, in my last answer, I mentioned some vendors of technology. And when I mention those, I'm just using them as examples. I'm not saying that I or anyone think that those are the best or even good. They're just meant as examples to be clear in my speaking.
Are you allowed to give us investment advice, or are we going to throw that disclaimer out too?
Everything here is for informational. And
now, with all that being said, I mean, I'm just curious from like the beginning, was there very much apprehension or pushback about like utilizing these tools and going down this path, or was it pretty, easy to get people on board, yourself included?
I think in terms of maybe 3 layers of information types, because of all the trainings I've had in information security. And one is public data. And it really seemed like no one cared if public data made it onto an AI.
Sure.
And so that could be things like abstracts that are publicly available to anyone. And that was one of the reasons that we started with a literature search tool, because that was public data. The next type of data might be business sensitive. So these are things that a company would prefer to keep secret, but aren't necessarily illegal for them to release. And that was where we moved next. There was some resistance there. The resistance was around, okay, if we're going to talk about things that are private to a company with an AI, can we have some sort of reasonable assurance? And luckily, we were able to get a contract with a vendor that allowed us to have those reasonable assurances. Part of the reason we were able to move to that sensitive data barrier so quickly, though, is because everyone really was just freaked out that patient data would somehow accidentally make it into an AI. And so we were all working very hard to make sure that didn't happen. And while we were making sure that didn't happen, my team came along and said, hey, we have these non-patient data use cases. They don't get anywhere near patient data. Do you think we could use the AI to help us prepare human subject protocols, to determine if a data might exist in a database without actually looking at the database? There's some descriptions. Do we have this data available? To looking at abstracts for research ideas people have. And so I think we were able to jump into that very quickly, because we're over here saying like, hey, we don't want to get anywhere near patient data. We want to do these other things. And they were sort of like, okay, sure, you can do that.
I love that, because I hear that a lot when sort of people, newbies who want to put their toe in the water, are afraid to start. And they always ask for advice. Well, how do I do it? I have all these security regulations. Maybe my InfoSec team won't let me do this. And there's so many use cases that you can just try without sensitive data. And that'll just start paving the way to get down the road or prove cases. So I really like that path that you laid out. Just try things with non-sensitive data.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you also in our previous call talked about when you do deal with sensitive data, you have an innovative way of handling that by you don't go out and use these chat GPU, OpenAI public models out on the web. You do something different, right?
It depends. We have a hybrid solution. And we started out with a cloud-only solution because these contracts that allowed us to do that were getting signed. We had reasonable assurances from vendors that our data would stay private and not be used for AI training. And then, of course, if we ever wanted to use anything that got anywhere near protected information security got involved. We followed all those processes. The institutional review board, ethics committees got involved as appropriate. But we recently spent what at the time felt like a bunch of money, but as you know, computer prices exploded in the last 3 months, and the same machine costs double now. We bought the resources to run fairly high parameter count models on campus. So examples include GPT OSS 120B from OpenAI, 120 billion parameter model, which is someone who used to build logistic regression models. Saying a model has 120 billion parameters is mind-boggling. Or even some of the models that get up to, say, 360 billion parameters. I think that's the largest we could fit on our hardware. But we now have this solution.
Just for somebody who may not understand what a parameter is, can you briefly explain that?
Yes. A parameter in a broad sense is a term that needs to be calculated based on available data. So that's a very abstract way of putting it. A simpler way to put it might be, if you remember y equals mx plus b from middle school, the equation of a line. Uh-oh, maybe that's even too deep. M and B are the parameters of your line. So
this isn't a video podcast, so you can't see my head exploding.
Are the parameters. Another way to think of it is it's a number that is like tuning a radio dial. So if you remember tuning a radio dial, trying to find where your station is the clearest, the frequency at which you could hear the music the clearest would be a parameter. And so that your
basically you have 120 billion knobs to turn to tune the model.
Yes. Okay. And we can handle models that have up to 360 knobs, 360 billion knobs. Sorry.
Wow. That's a lot.
So we are now
you host these.
Yes, we have a server running these physically on campus. We actually just did some testing to show that if you send a chat message to one of our models originating on campus, that the data will never leave campus. And so now we can start to play in scenarios that need the walled garden, which honestly, we are having a hard time thinking up use cases because our agreements with these vendors are so stringent anyway. But we've come up with some ideas that we have not tried yet. But there are, for example, certain information types, certain patient types, so certain very vulnerable population, like, say, substance abuse patients, as an example. If you disclose information about a substance abuse patient, that may carry a higher fine than other types of patients because we consider that especially sensitive. And so maybe that's a use case that we'll eventually do. One that we're starting to roll out immediately is, even though we have these agreements with vendors, some of our researchers are really sensitive to the idea of products they want to build or inventions they want to try, those ideas going off campus. And so even though technically we have assurances that nothing would be disclosed, they really want the safety blanket of knowing that their information never leaves campus for, their ideas that they think might be worth millions or billions of dollars.
So what I'm really interested in here is, especially in the medical field, you're working with very sensitive, very high quality data. The outputs you get are incredibly important. So, I mean, could be life and death in some cases, or could be a cure or some preventative measure. This is not help me write this email, organize my calendar. So how do you evaluate these different models?
Luckily, there are some corporations very interested in proving that their open weight models are unbiased and reliable. And so some of that we can farm out to work that folks are already doing. But it is something we're very much worried about. So we're very much thinking about who are the sources of on-site models we might use. For example, you could imagine foreign state actors who have a vendetta against certain ethnic groups. And if somehow their bias got built into a model through either sneakiness or coercion, well, what if suddenly we were recommending worse treatments for people from certain ethnic groups? We obviously wouldn't want that. And so we are
You
thinking
wouldn't do
about
that intentionally, but it's all based on that training data or somebody fine-tuning one of those knobs you were talking about.
Yes, exactly. So someone doing it intentionally, or perhaps they just scraped the wrong database and unintentionally built these biases into our model. Luckily, there are some data sets out there that sort of adversarially attack this, where you can say, okay, what we've done is we've taken a bunch of records and race swapped them. So we just suddenly change someone's race and see if the model gives a different answer, someone's ethnicity, and see if the model gives a different answer. There are methods for testing this, but the problem with LLMs, large language models, things like ChatGPT in particular, is that they are stochastic by nature. That means random by nature. The way that you do all of the parallel calculations on a GPU to have this thing spit out an answer back to you in human readable text, there's some randomness involved in which processor returns an answer first in a massively parallel calculation. And it turns out that no matter what you try to set as fixed, you're always going to have this inherent randomness because of the GPU's temperature, because of power fluctuation. All kinds of things can cause a different processor to respond first. And these things are very sensitive to those differences in their calculations. And so you will get wildly different answers from one run to another. So as folks start to say that they're testing these things and proving reliability, I think we have to remember that that reliability is a probabilistic statement, not a definite statement.
I think that's a very important point. Yeah. And, like you said, and I think that training data, uh, that it just, I think the power to use this in the medical field is amazing, but these are things people have to realize
Yeah.
and think about, which is, I mean, basically what you're doing, which I think is fantastic.
I'm
Okay.
curious. So the things you mentioned, like issues of possibly cultural bias or sticking to security and privacy being a major concern, like are there any instances you know of where those those like that wasn't taken into consideration or something was used in a inappropriate way?
I know of a story of a traditional machine learning model that was built late 2010s that
Hmm.
would recommend lower doses of pain medication to Black people without fail. And one way I heard it put was, well, they didn't build a pain medication recommendation system; they built a Black person detector, which is kind of true. And so that's an example of bias. Or there's another famous example of early editions of Face ID on iPhones. Um, any Asian woman could unlock any other Asian woman's phone. It's something like that. That's probably an exaggeration. So there are things that we've seen in actual technology products that have been out in the world, and I think we have to remember that these things are very new. We're in the early days. We're in the Model T stage.
Yeah.
We haven't found the Cadillacs yet, and so there are going to be problems. And we
I've
really,
heard of it. I've heard a lot of analogies, but I like that one. The model.
we have to approach it cautiously. One of the things that I've been pushing for at every opportunity is if we're going to put chatbots that are running large language models in front of patients or even providers at some point, instead of just letting the chatbot write the answer, I think what we have to do is let the chatbot choose the answer. So similar to if you had someone in a call center that you forced to only answer things from a written script in front of them, we can do the same thing with an AI. That's similar to how we guarantee that our citations aren't hallucinated. The AI is picking the citations, not writing them. And so I think you could use large language model technology to understand people's questions, to know intelligently from your decision tree or from your big list of possible answers which one to pick. But that would avoid things like an AI telling someone to kill themselves, which has happened.
Yes. Yeah.
If you just make sure that nothing in that tree or that list has, have you thought about suicide? that probably isn't going to be the thing it can say because you've made it impossible for it to say it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's shift gears a little bit. One of the hats that you wear is an actual professor. So you teach students, you work with students. You, I think, have somewhat of an innovative approach to generative AI that is different than some of the stuff we hear. But you say basically you're all in and you really want your students to use it. Can you kind of describe your policy towards that?
Absolutely. I teach a class called Bioinformatics Algorithms, which was an almost exclusively coding class until the last 3 years. Because if you could instantiate an algorithm in code, that meant you understood the algorithm. But now that might just mean that you're really good at talking to ChatGPT. And so initially, what I did was tell students, go for it. You can use it however you want to solve your problems. And I wanted to see what happened. I did at the same time implement oral exams in that class. So a student had to stand in front of me without nothing in their hands, no phone, no smartwatch, no computer, and talk to me about the content. So I got some evidence that they understood what was going on. But I actually got feedback from students that year that they felt like they really missed out on learning from writing code because they were just having the AI do it for them because it was easier.
Oh,
Which is
interesting. So
interesting.
the students came to you and said
Yes.
they missed out.
Yeah. It is too easy. I'm not going to stop myself. I need you to stop me, is sort of what I heard in the background there. So rather than stopping people from using generative AI, I instituted code reviews. So now when you write code, at least once in the semester, every person in my class has to stand in front of the class, present the code they wrote, defend it, me asking questions, other students asking questions, and I actually grade the questions students are asking. So there is a incentive to ask hard questions of the person presenting. And so there is at least some check that you understood some of the code you turned in the semester, even if it was written by an AI. And I'm keeping the oral final exam as well. So they're going to have to stand there and have a conversation with me about the content of the class. But I think it's really hard. I think it is incumbent upon instructors to, as best they can, help people enter this new world. Because as someone who uses code in their actual job, especially in the last month with things like Codex 5.3, Claude Opus 4.6, and Claude Code, no one knows how to name anything in this field, by the way. It's just horrendous. And think about the company that has 12 different products all called Copilot. My goodness.
Oh gosh, don't even start.
But the coding agents have really gotten a lot better just within the last month or two. And I don't know at this moment what job, for example, a junior developer would have on my team. I need senior developers. I need people who can architect the solution before handing it to a coding agent. I need people who can understand if the coding agent's commit or code that it wrote satisfies the requirements. But as far as writing up a feature to a piece of software and handling it to a developer to go create, it's faster to just hand it to Claude Code or something similar.
So I just had this conversation with the professor a few minutes before we started this, and we were debating whether or not a coding background helps you problem solve when you're coding. So a lot of coding is about problem solving. There's a reason you're coding, the reason you're producing code, that analytical brain and having the background in coding, does that help when you're doing this coding with something like Claude Code or Cursor or even ChatGPT, Codex, whatever you're using? Does the coding background help, or is it truly somebody off the street can come in and go right to it?
I think the coding background helps, but only if you have a lot of experience. That's my feeling at the moment. That's why I mentioned I need senior developers.
Yeah.
I need people who know how to fix the 1% problem that Codex or Claude Code or whatever can't solve. Because the 99% of problems that we're working on, I can just hand to a coding agent at this point. But there's 1% of problems I can't. Those are often mission critical. So I need someone who has enough experience to spot those 1% problems and remember that Stack Overflow conversation they read 12 years ago. For junior
Does that
developer,
exist anymore?
they've taken a big hit. It's only every once in a while now that I go to Stack Overflow, where it used to be a daily occurrence. But for someone just coming out of school and just starting to program, it would be really hard for me right now to justify hiring you.
No,
Which is just
how do we
scary
get
thing.
senior developers?
yeah, like could you not see it as like AI helping with like that pipeline from junior to senior to where it'll make it easier and quicker to either always have them or have more of them, whatever it may be?
I think there is a little bit of a old man yells at cloud in the response I'm going to give you, but also a little bit of fear. All of the people I know who are excellent at coding got there from working on personal projects and struggling for hours on a couple of lines of code to get something right. And I think that struggle is how you develop the cognitive skills for troubleshooting and the patience for troubleshooting. My goodness, even before generative AI, I've encountered students who just, it didn't work, here's the error. What have you tried? Sending you the error? Oh my goodness. The coding agent could do that too. I think that the struggle was important for a lot of people who are really good at code right now. And I think that means we either have to figure out how to recreate that struggle while coding agents exist, or we need a better pedagogy of teaching code. But at the moment, we have not made that transition. The computer science professors have not radically altered all of their curricula to address the fact that we have coding agents. And until that happens, I think there's going to be like a generational gap of junior developers who don't really know what to do when the coding agent doesn't get it right.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that, because I've thought about that quite a bit myself, like, do you think that perhaps in the classroom is where you can help solve for that specifically by, teaching and ingraining in these students, like, don't just make it like this copy and paste, over and over again thing, like, learn what you're doing, use it to expand upon your skills, help hammer home things you're struggling with.
I think there are some people who would do that, but what I've heard from students and other professors is the temptation is just too great. You're working on it the night before. At that moment, you're not really worried about your learning. You just want to not fail. And so you go have the coding agent do it. And then you do that again the next time. And at some point, you realize, or you don't even realize that you're going down this like easy path that's teaching you nothing because you're just trying not to fail.
Yeah.
So you seem to have experience with coding agents. What's your tool of choice?
It changes about every 2 weeks because there's like a cycle of Gemini CLI will be doing better, and then suddenly Codex will be doing better, and then suddenly Claude Code will be doing better, and then randomly Quinn Coder will do better. Some third party. At this very moment in time, I'm mostly using Claude Code for writing code.
Has that enabled you to do more, or are you just replacing other tasks you would be doing?
I was sharing this with someone on my team the other day that we do a project management system where we'll work on one thing all together for 6 weeks at a time, and we won't work on anything else. It's called Shape Up. There's a book out there by the folks who created Basecamp, the software. So we do this system, and week 2 on a recent project, we got some really intense feedback from a stakeholder, and we addressed it all in a week. But I was reflecting with the team, if we had not had coding agents helping us, we would have spent the remaining 4 weeks or more, or just given up, addressing all of the feedback that was given to us in week 2. So in my mind, we have at least collapsed 4 weeks worth of work into one using coding agents.
So you must have a lot of free time now.
I wish. I think the problem is that it becomes a little bit of a drug to see, I want this implemented. And then I sit back and, maybe I pick up my Nintendo Switch and play Pokemon Leaf Green for a few minutes. And then I look back up Claude asks me 5 questions. I answer the questions. I go back, I catch Mewtwo, and then it's done. And it is just so tempting to keep sitting there because I could just implement the next feature. And that happens to me so frequently at say 4:55 p.m. where I need to go hang out with my family. And instead, I just want to implement the next feature because I know how quickly and easily it can get done. And so there's this weird tension of this technology that has cut, or what should have cut based on the description I just gave you, my workday by 75%, has somehow seen me working longer than usual most days since it came out.
You are a real life example of what you hear out in the media. You hear about not only developers, but just the regular Joe Schmo out there who's experimenting with these coding agents and just producing whatever they want. You don't even need to be a senior developer. You can produce, and it is
Mhm.
addictive. Like, ooh, a new feature, a new feature. I'm I am just as guilty. The hours that I put in doing this, like I know I should go to bed. I should not, like it's just like one more button, one more button. I mean, with Claude Code, everything's yes and no. So it's like, do you want to do this? Yes. Do you want to do this? Yes. And it's just over and over again. And I get it. It's a dopamine hit, right? Because you keep
Yeah.
seeing these cool new features. So it is real life truism that people are weirdly working more. They are
Mhm.
more productive, but they're actually spending more time, which doesn't seem like that should be what's going on.
Yeah. And I think it is reasonable to ask, well, does that just mean that you're having more fun with your job? Does that mean that your job is more satisfying? I, for one, have struggled with workaholism and toxic productivity culture. I used to really be into the toxic product or the productivity books and optimizing every single thing about my life. I have one of them still on my desk here in front of me. Uh, I'm a fan of the Tim Ferriss podcast. No
Hmm.
shame on Tim Ferriss, but you can fall into this toxic productivity lifestyle, and I did for a long time until I worked with a therapist to try to dig my way out. And one of the things that the therapist got me doing is you need to have hobbies. You need to have multiple chances at success every day, was the way she phrased it. Well, now my Claude Code and Pokemon Leaf Green time is eating into electric guitar, is eating
Hmm.
into yoga, is eating into my other hobbies. And I don't know how to deal with that dissonance between I just within the last year felt like I dug myself out of this toxic productivity hole, and here comes coding agents to just like they're not shoving me back in, but they're putting like a pot of gold at the bottom of the hole, and so I'm diving back in willingly.
Oh, I get it. I get it. I'm the stuff that I'm producing now, whether it's personal or work, I'm not necessarily doing something faster. I'm just doing things I could never do before. I think that's the cool thing. You can produce something out of nothing now,
Yes.
and it's custom built for exactly what you want.
I do think we'll reach a place of building an application will be like making an Instagram post. We may already be there. I heard an interesting analogy though that really hit home. Everyone thought that once 3D printers were out in the world, no one would buy anything. They would just 3D print them.
Hmm.
Well, that's not true.
Mm,
Nothing on my desk was 3D printed right now.
fair
And I
enough. Yeah, I
wonder
guess.
if we'll sort of settle into that place of there is a place for these things, but it's not like every application will now be custom and no one will be buying software anymore.
Yeah, do you think maybe also too part of why it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole is just because it's still so like new and novel, and then once that maybe wears away a bit, you won't feel that need of like implement this, then implement this. It's just like I could take care of it tomorrow.
I think that we could get there, essentially treating the coding agents like other employees or that you want to stop talking to when it comes to 5 p.m. or something like that.
Sure.
The other thing that I think might happen and that I'm very hopeful for actually is that these things will get good enough that you don't have to watch them so closely.
Hmm.
Like the real reason that I'm working later in that cycle I just described is because I need to be sitting there watching Claude Code, or at least checking in on it, maybe on an hourly basis. Um, we did have a situation that no information went anywhere it shouldn't have. I'll say that. But we had a coding agent send emails when we didn't realize it could. And the fact that that happened means someone does need to be watching these things still, or it just starts going down the wrong path, and before you know it, your code base is unrecognizable. And sure, you can reverse all of its commits, but overnight you spent $1,000 on the tokens to have work that you're now going to have to completely undo. And so I think that's part of why I have to sit there. And so I hear you on, maybe eventually I'll just treat it like I do employees and say, oh, it's past 5, I shouldn't be talking to you anymore. On the other hand, maybe it'll become a thing that can truly just work in the background without me feeling like I have to babysit it.
Interesting. Okay. Let's shift back into the academic world. You work with your students, you've talked about coding use cases. Are there other tools you use and promote, whether it's for student learning or studying, or you use in your own teaching?
I am a Notebook LM user for sure on Google.
I've been waiting a long time for this one.
For teaching, I put all of my course materials in Notebook LM. And if I want to have a quiz question that's maybe different from last year, I'll ask it for suggestions. And I will tell you the hit rate is only about 30%. 70%
Why is that?
the questions it will write are, it got hooked on some piece of irrelevant information instead of like the big topic. Or it'll go down a rabbit hole and ask 10 questions in a row about one thing. Just like, no, one was fine. Go on from that. But I do use it to get ideas for creating reading guides. I'll ask it for, what are the key vocabulary things that at the end of this students should really know, be able to talk about at a dinner party. What are the key questions that someone should be able to answer about the Manhattan tourist problem, because I'm an algorithms person. And so I am using Notebook LM. I do find it really useful, but not in a blanket way. Like, I would even hesitate to tell students to use it to study, because I feel like only about 30% of the things it's going to give them are going to be useful.
Interesting. Have you ever tried to create a custom TA or a custom tutor in Notebook LM by really loading the exact course materials into it and then sharing that with the students?
I have created that for myself for the things that I'm describing, but I have not shared it with students. I did try in the early days, like early 2023, creating my own custom retrieval augmented generation bot that would pull materials. And that also didn't work very well. So there's not, at least for the class I teach, I don't feel like we're there at like an automated tutor place yet. I know that famously everyone loves the podcasts it generates. I'll tell you a story there. We were told by a publication's lawyers that they considered uploading their material to Notebook LM a copyright violation, and we needed to stop. And so we did. And we also built an in-house solution to generate those podcasts without having to send that material to other people's servers. I'm not a lawyer, but at least as I understand it, that's the sort of test. It's called the server test. That if you upload copyrighted material to a server and you did not have explicit permission, you have violated copyright. And so now we can generate those podcasts without having to do that. And so I think we're addressing what that publisher's lawyers wanted us to do.
Are there any other tools besides Notebook LM that you used or that maybe your students use?
Copilot is for some reason very big with my students. I think maybe because it's free for them.
Okay.
But I've heard several students tell me that they're using Copilot to help them write code. And then a couple are using Gemini, a couple ChatGPT, and I think one student told me about Claude, but for some reason it's come in the minority so far with students.
So you've talked about, obviously, you mentioned the junior developers, but what role are humans playing in this new world where, we focused on code a little bit, but even in the medical field now, what role are the humans playing if these other intelligences are now producing all the information?
I think a big part is going to remain for a long time of figuring out what questions are worth asking, what problems are worth solving. And so I think humans still have a lock on that. And currently, like I said, the tools at the lowest level do need to be babysat. And so you need a human babysitting, answering the questions, catching it when it goes off in a wrong direction. And then I do think there's still a role for the, I mentioned several times now, like a senior developer idea of, well, not only do I need to know what questions are worth answering, I need to understand how to architect the solution in a way that's going to be long-term sustainable, that's going to be modular and reusable for other similar problems, and that will for sure meet all of the requirements of the thing we're trying to build. And so I think coming up with the answer, architecting the solution, and then at the lowest level, babysitting the thing, implementing the solution are all places where I see humans right now. I hope that that babysitting level will go away. But that is scary because that means that that's a job level that's maybe not needed anymore.
And then how do you see higher education adapting and changing? I mean, I'll give you a longer horizon, maybe over the next decade. Is it still the professor sharing the knowledge with their students, or is there some other relationship and method that the students master a subject?
I think that in the short term, we don't really know what to do on that front. It is important for people who leave with a degree in a certain field, leave with a PhD in a certain field, to be experts in that field in and of themselves for those titles to mean anything. Like having a PhD in a field means that you are an expert in that field alone, unassisted. And if you are only an expert in the field when assisted by an AI, then the meaning of that title has changed. And I think that there's one way of thinking about that and saying, well, it doesn't matter. This technology's here. This is like saying you won't always have a calculator with you, what they told us in middle school. And now we have our phones that have calculators on them, or our smartwatches even have calculators. So we do always have a calculator with us. Maybe we just need to say it is okay to be an expert when assisted by an AI. But I also think about the scenario where like something really horrible happens and there aren't any more AIs and there are only the people. And if we don't have those experts there, then that knowledge is just lost. But maybe that's too dark of a future to think about.
Do you think maybe
So,
there's like a pathway that could be made that, obviously it probably wouldn't work in every field, but like with what we're talking about, where you're now taking, say, that junior developer role and you're actually bringing that into the classroom. So, like, I know for me, when I was going to school, it was just a lot of like learning random things. You're getting some abilities and knowledge, but it's not the same as when you're actually doing that role full time for a position. Do you think maybe finding kind of like a middle ground or a bridge between education and then actually doing that career?
It's a good point. And I think it comes to a deeper point that as a society we're dealing with, what is the point of things like college? Are they vocational training programs? In which case, totally reasonable to teach people how to do these things with AI. Or is college a knowledge repository builder that takes humans and turns them into stores of knowledge? In which case, we probably shouldn't let people use AI. And there's obviously a spectrum of answers between those two. But I think that as a society, we're in this place where we're not sure what higher education is for anymore. And I think that as an optimist, something beautiful will eventually come out of that. But in the short term, I think it is going to be rather difficult and a little bit scary.
so what advice do you give your students now that we could pass on to Wake Forest students about how to thrive in in the higher education college environment right now?
If you aren't using generative AI, you are probably disadvantaging yourself because everyone else is. That would be
Mm.
my first thought. Maybe that's a terrible way to give advice. You should do it because everyone else is. But it is true. Your employer in the future will expect you to use all of the tools available to you in the most efficient ways to accomplish your goals. And generative AI is certainly a big part of that right this very moment. I think for students who want more than just vocational training out of a higher education, you do need to sometimes put away the AI and make sure you can still solve the problem. I even do this. I always have a calculator with me, but occasionally I'll get a really hard math problem and I'll sit there and be like, okay, let's just make sure. Can I still do this in my head?
Okay, but let's point out again, you have a master's degree in math. Not everybody wants to do that.
Sure, for that specific example. But, for the English major, maybe occasionally don't ask the AI to help you correct your grammar or come up with the best analogy or come up with the best analysis of the piece of literature you're reading. Make sure you can do it yourself. Just have those checks. Hopefully, as instructors, your professors like me will figure out how to force those checks on you. But until we do, it is incumbent upon you to do that, and really to your benefit. But I don't think you should abandon generative AI entirely because no one else is.
All right. Well, that's some very interesting wisdom. Don't abandon generative AI because nobody else is. I love it. I love it. Thank you for this conversation. I think you've given us a lot to think about. You've shown us some really cool things that you're doing. And of course, Wake Forest is going to take all the credit for it. Not your undergrad school or the years you've spent at UAB or Wells Fargo or any other jobs you had before that. Wake Forest has taken all the credit for that. So we appreciate that. And I'm sure that our advancement office will be contacting you.
Oh,
No, but again, thank you for this conversation, and thank you for showing us what's possible in the in this new world of generative AI.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thanks again to our guests, and thanks for listening to the Deeks.ai podcast. Please continue to follow the AI discussion by subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you have any comments, questions, or want to join the discussion, please email us at deeks.ai@wfu.edu.